So, hello, Kate Frost.
Hello.
Now a Kindle top 10 best-selling author. You're going to tell us a little bit about A Greek Island Escape and
Yes.
also the books you've done previously, and I would imagine the ones in the pipeline as well.
Yeah, yes, there's more to come.
Yeah. So you do love a beautiful destination.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was thinking about this because I've always liked writing about, like, ideas always come from, or not always, but usually come from a setting, a place. So
Mhm.
it's sort of naturally how I write, that the idea stems from, so my debut novel, which I self-published, is set in Greece and North Norfolk, two places that I know well. And my children's series of children's books was inspired by a day trip to Warwick Castle. So although that's not so much of a romantic, beautiful destination, but my series of romantic escape books all just make sense to be set
So you
in.
sort of find when you go somewhere new, it kind of really jogs the inspiration and gives you lots of
Yeah,
ideas.
yeah,
And
definitely. And I've used places that I've been to inspire some of my previous books. I've kind of got to the point now where I need to go to these places now, which has been difficult over the last few years with lockdowns and things like that. So it has meant not being able to travel to as many places as I would have liked to. But it's still lovely to write about beautiful locations, even just,
yes,
as armchair travel, just
and
yeah.
what do you think if a writer is trying to evoke a totally different place and sort of transport the reader there? What are the important elements that you try to capture?
Oh, it's all the senses. And I think because I sort of treat the location, the setting as another character.
Hmm.
And it quite often um either inspires some of the, what happens to the character, or the sort of they feed off the location that where they are at the time. But it's definitely sort of bringing the place to a, place alive with smells as well as the sights, and the food being particularly
Yes,
important.
yes,
Yeah.
certainly the latest book, there's a lot of
Yeah.
delicious Greek food.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yeah. And I think people, I mean, as readers, and certainly, with these kind of books that are set in Italy or Greece or wherever, when you go somewhere like that, the food is so important and
Yeah.
really immerses yourself in the place. So I think it sort of adds, and I just like writing about it as well. So it sort of adds to it. And then it's sort of easy to bring that side of it in.
Hmm. And
Definitely.
you have got quite a strong personal connection with Greece, don't you?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my husband's Greek. So all his family live out in Greece, on mainland Greece, not far from Mount Olympus, actually. It's sort of
Right.
close from Saloniki.
Yes. So you've
Yeah.
got that sort of really, it's like the outsider's inside view. You've got the kind of
Yes.
real track on what it's like to live in Greece, what it's like to be Greek. And I
Yeah.
think that does come out really well in the latest book. And that's that conflict also between people who live in Greece all the time, and then,
Yeah.
they want tourists to come and they obviously get a lot out of the tourist trade, but then there's that conflict as well about
Yeah.
houses turning into holiday homes and
Well, definitely, yes.
so
Yeah. In fact, I didn't even go abroad until I think I was 23. So the first time I went abroad and to Greece, and in fact on a plane, was at the age of 23 with my boyfriend, who is now my husband, to meet
ah,
his parents. So it was
right.
quite a quite a big thing.
There was a lot, yeah, there was a lot of new stuff going on there, wasn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
So the two of you met in Britain then?
Yes, we met working in a cinema, of all places.
Ah, right.
Yes, and he was living over here because he'd come to university in the UK, although we went to different universities and then met in Bristol, where I live and where he was at university. Yes, and he stayed living in the UK. So he hasn't actually lived back in Greece since he was 18, 19 years old,
Yeah.
over here since
But
then.
I mean, I'm just trying to imagine if you've never left Britain before and then you're transported to Greece. I mean, that must have felt like a real assault to the senses and everything was different. And
Oh yeah, I mean, holidays when I was growing up were camping holidays with my family in the UK, usually when it was chucking it down with rain, although they are absolutely lovely memories. They're some of my favorite childhood memories, but just so completely different to, the heat, the food, the amount of, family all get-togethers. It was just, it's shown as in the books. It's absolutely true. As all the family sitting around the table, just conversations, shouting, which is just normal
Yeah.
talking in Greece. Just food everywhere and just piles of food being put onto my plate. And yeah, so but it was wonderful, but yeah, quite intense. And also it wasn't just meeting sort of the parents, it was meeting the whole of his family. So I
Yes.
think even once we got off the plane, we were taken to sort of to his grandparents, each grandparent's house, and then aunts, and then before we'd even got back to his, the family house. So
Right. Everyone was like, I'm
it
in
was
the
full
queue.
on, yeah.
Yeah. And did you start writing at about that time, or had you always been, have you been writing for a long time before that?
Yeah, well, I started writing when I had open heart surgery for a hole in my heart when I was 7,
Oh my
which
God.
was quite major, but a really kind of good memory for me. It wasn't for my parents, but for me, I think I was young enough for it to just be an adventure and
Exciting.
not have
Yeah.
the fear of actually how serious it was.
Hmm.
But I was at home and had a home tutor for a few months afterwards, recovering because I couldn't go to school. And I remember her teaching me, well, she probably taught me lots of things, but the two things that I remember her teaching me about was about dinosaurs and how to write stories.
Ah.
And it was that I just got hooked on writing stories. So I wrote my first novel when I was 8, a time travel adventure, and it was something that I always wanted to do. I
Hmm.
sort of got sidetracked in my teens and was more into drama and wanting to act. And then sort of in my 20s, I sort of got back into, no, actually writing is what I really, really want to do.
Now,
So
interesting you say about you did drama and stuff,
yeah,
because when I was reading The Greek Island Escape, it really struck me how much knowledge you have about Xanthe being a performer and, the challenges of being on stage and
yeah,
doing it day after day after day and all the things you have to, it's a very unique lifestyle. And
yeah,
you can see how people hang out, she has this sort of friends who do a similar thing, and you're obviously all out late at night. And
yeah.
so I was thinking, did Kate do all this research, or does it actually come from something she's done in the past?
Yeah, well, I mean, I went to a few auditions and I worked as, I mainly worked as a supporting artist in film and TV. So I did sort of odd days on TV program, on Casualty, and I did a couple of films and things like that.
Really?
So
Oh.
I was in Vanity Fair and King Arthur. And so I had all those kind of, it's just an odd day here and there, but it was, just an amazing experience and being on film sets. And I've done plays and been behind the scenes in theatre and acted on stage. Musical theatre is something that I think if somebody could have said anything other than writing, what would you like to do? I think I would have said musical theatre. I can't really sing. I definitely can't dance. I can act, but I haven't got the full package. But I think it's one of those things that I would have absolutely loved to have done.
Mm.
So I think when I was thinking of this book, I kind of knew that I wanted a character who was performing in some way. And so sort of the musical theatre side. So I had to do some research because I haven't worked like that. But I know that sort of camaraderie of working on.
But what I was going to say is, I've often thought that writing and acting, there's a lot of similarities because you are taking on a character and you
Yeah,
are trying to imagine, life in their shoes, as it were.
yeah. I think completely. And I think that's why I've loved both of those things, sort of the acting and the writing. Um, Even though sort of the writing came first, but then sort of got into acting in my teens. But I do, when I'm writing, it is putting yourself in those. And I think that's why I really love writing those characters that are so completely unlike me. Because it was always on, when I was in plays, it was always the characters that were so different to yourself that were really exciting and challenging to play. So I
Because
think it's
you're,
the same with
yeah,
writing, You're not having to stand on stage and perform. It's a different thing. It's sort of, once it's out in the world, then you've got the judgment. But rather than it being you physically embodying the character, it's and yeah, and being able to write lots of different characters all within one piece of work. It's yeah, it's lovely. I love it.
Yeah. And you often do people at a particular stage in life, or
Yeah.
about to embark on a romance that they don't, they don't even know about yet. And
Yeah.
that's obviously an area that you're really interested in.
Yeah, well, I think for the Boldwood books, me and Caroline, my editor, sort of decided on characters within their 30s. I think we needed to limit it because before I'd sort of written characters in 20s, their 30s, their 40s. So it was quite spread out. So I think for the Boldwood books, they wanted me to sort of concentrate on a certain, I suppose it makes it easier to market it and where it sits and things like that. But actually, your 30s is such a vast, there's so much that can happen in your 30s. Because you think of somebody who's just age 30 to somebody who's age 39, it's vastly different. So I think it kind of gives me the freedom of writing about lots of different characters at very different stages in their lives. So yeah, so I think it's quite an interesting
And
sort
I
of
think it
decade.
can be quite a pivotal decade, can't it? You're
Yeah,
making those decisions about, are you going to commit to one person? Are you
yeah.
going to have a family? Or, what priorities are really going to come to the fore in your life?
Yeah, definitely. And I think because often my characters are either escaping something or trying to find something, it's the 30s sort of make sense. I think there's quite a few different ways that I can go with that. So yeah, so certainly for the bolder books, that's the age group that I'll be sticking with.
Yes. And I believe you are sticking with islands.
Yes.
Which
Yeah, again,
is
that
a
was the
very
other thing.
interesting idea. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Caroline, when she sort of approached me about writing sort of romantic escape novels for Boldwood, because again, I'd written, in fact, some of mine are about islands, but it was sort of different. I've got books set in Tanzania and the Maldives. So we decided on European islands to sort of, that would be sort of the unique selling point as such. But actually, there's so many. I mean, it could
So
be
many.
endless. So
Yes.
yeah.
So I'm guessing you're now an expert in European islands.
Yeah, I've got pretty good at researching stuff, and also it then can give, there's always sort of Greece is sort of a place that I'm comfortable writing about, so there's sort of limitless with that. And in fact, with I've got 6 books, the next 6-book contract, there'll only be one set in Greece, but yeah, I mean, it's endless really. So
So tell us about the hunky heroes. Where did they come from? What's the research done on the hunky heroes?
oh well, yeah, well, I mean, I think again for a romance, it's sort of, I mean, it's a given really, isn't it? And I think they look good, but they don't always, they're sort of flawed characters as well. They're not always straightforward and just, but I think people like to read about those types of characters. So yes, and I am married to a tall, dark, handsome Greek. So yeah. But yeah, so it's sort of, yeah, I think it just is sort of that expectation, isn't it, with romance novels as well. So
Yes, and I think you're very good at getting under the surface of these people. That, especially if they're a bit prickly and bristly on the outside and take a lot to get to know. I think that's
yes.
a really interesting journey. Is a lot of people would just go, okay, not interested, fine. But in this particular book, there's a lot of kind of getting past that frosty exterior.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, although my books are romances, it's those characters and those relationships that I really like writing about. So obviously you've got the core romance, but it's often about family, and usually dysfunctional families or something that's gone wrong, which is again completely different to luckily my own experience, because I was really fortunate having a wonderful family growing up and things like that, and a wonderful family now. So, but that's what the interesting things to write about, and also friendships as well. So although the romance sort of, I guess, drives the story. There's those other relationships that sort of entwine through it as well.
Mm. And what is your writing process? I mean, do you have a process, or does it vary book by book, or?
No, I do have a process now, mainly because of writing to quite tight deadlines. I kind of have to. So I tend to do, sort of try and plot it out X number of words per week or per day, to get a first draft written in 12 weeks. And it's a really, really, really rough first draft. And then I take almost as much time, or I like to have almost as much time to then go back and edit it before it gets sent to my editor. But yeah, that's just the way I've kind of found that I work best. So,
and so do you go with quite a detailed synopsis for yourself before you start? No.
no.
And it's always interesting whether people do that or don't do that. And I would say I would say probably most authors I've spoken to don't plot things out too tightly.
Yeah,
They
I
like to
think
kind
it's
of
a
be
mix, isn't it? I
inspired.
think I'm somewhere in the middle, as in I do have some idea, and I think I'm finding it more helpful. I keep on thinking I should probably plot a bit more, because I think it will make it, maybe the first draft won't be quite as rough if I actually plotted a bit more. But yeah, so I tend to know obviously the sort of start and sort of the characters and have a rough idea. And also because I'm writing romance, there are certain things that are going to happen, and you know what the end, even if I don't know exactly what the ending be, I know it's going to be a happy ending. So, it's that end point you're getting to. So, but I also find, and maybe it's that thing of, like you're saying, as in putting yourself in the characters like you would acting. I just tend to find that quite often the characters will suddenly do or say something. I'm like, where on earth did that come from? And it's almost like you're sort of, and
You're
I love it when that
channeling.
happens. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, you surprise yourself. And I mean, it's not always works, but yeah, I think once you get into it and get familiar with the characters and I guess get through that really difficult middle bit, which I always get stuck on, and then something will hopefully lead it in the way that works, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. And do you sort of have that gut feeling, this has worked, this is a bit soggy? I
Yeah,
hope
but one
it's
I
gonna be okay.
finished, I think when we last spoke, I was just at the end of the structural edits and I was just having wasn't a nightmare with it, but I'd really, really struggled with the book. And I'd got in the middle, I'd got to the point where I'd almost ground to a stop until I started writing from the male character's point of view, which I haven't done in other books.
Right.
And it really worked because it suddenly, the story started moving forward. So yeah, so the next book that's out in August has got different points of view. So it's got the main female character's point of view, the main male character's point of view, plus a couple of the friends as well.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's different. It's different to, I guess, the ones that I've wrote so far. But it was one of the hardest books I've written. But I'm actually, once I got to the end and all the structural edits were done and the copy edit was done, I'm actually really, really pleased with it and really proud of it, because it was such a struggle to write, and whether it was I was worried about it not turning out okay, that touch wood, it's really pleased with that.
And I'm sure the more successful the books are, the more you feel the pressure on the next thing you're going to do.
Yeah, and I think it's that, like we were saying, I mean, I'm just blown away with how well The Greek Island Escape has done, and it's got into the top 10 and it's still there. This is number 9 again this morning. But it's that weird thing, isn't it, that you then put pressure on yourself going, oh, well, I want the next book to to do that one. And every book is, particularly writing, although they're sort of the same genre, they're all different books, different settings, different characters, different themes. So it's not always going to be a book that, one person might read one of my books and love it, and then read another of my books and not love it as much because they're different.
Yeah.
So I guess you can't really tell how each book is going to be received. But yeah, I think it's that pressure that we put on ourselves going, oh, we want it to do, one better than the last book. And yeah. So.
Yes, which I guess brings me to the question of what are the things about being an author that you love the most and hate the most?
Yeah. I think I love getting to that end of that first draft. Because I find I'm I think I'm a bit strange in the fact that I really like the editing process, and it sort of feels, once I have that first draft, however rough it is and however much work it needs, there is something there. There's sort of the bare bones of the story, and there's something to work with.
Yeah.
So I really like that feeling of, wow, how did I get to that point? And then you can sort of go back and fix everything and make it better. And so I really like that. And I don't think there's anything I hate, but I guess I dislike, because hate is too strong a word, publication day. I just find it, I think the more books are published, it feels quite stressful. And it's,
Yep.
but, you know, unless you're doing something like an actual book launch, which I've only sort of had one proper book launch, that was good because it sort of was something celebrating it and doing something. But I think otherwise it can be a bit of a strange day.
Yes, and that feeling that something has kind of been yours or a
Yeah.
small group of people's, and then you're catapulting it out into the world and
Yeah. I'm waiting for
waiting
those.
for the reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, and also with with this book, it happened with my first book with Boldwoods. I had somebody post a 2-star review, and it was obviously posted the second it turned midnight because it was the first review on there. And that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinions. I don't mind getting, you know, as long as they're not absolutely ripping you apart. It comes with the
Yeah.
territory, doesn't it? Bad
I know,
reviews.
but for
But it's
somebody
just soul destroying. So, and I had the
to do
same
it so
with this one
deliberately.
as well, like a low rating immediately. And this book has actually ended up being my highest rated book, you know, reviews, ratings wise. But yeah, those first few days were just like that sinking feeling of,
But
oh
that is a
no.
little bit vindictive, really, for someone to go, it has just come out, let me get my 2-star review out there.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
So
Oh dear.
yeah, it's a weird thing. It's sort of a stressful, odd day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And so what things do you do or enjoy doing on the marketing front?
um, well, I do. I mean, because I've got two things. I've got obviously the Boldwood published books and self-published books, so it is slightly different. I mean, I try and do social media sort of regularly. I did start on TikTok, and I've now realized I've ground to the halt. I think with the last structural edits, I just didn't have time and sort of stopped. So yeah, I mean, social media posts, I think just doing things as and when. And for self-published books, it's Amazon ads that really, you know,
Make the
drive
difference.
sales and make a difference. So, but also it's that thing of the more books you have, and I suppose also with, you know, the publication, you know, I've had a book out in February, there's another one out in August. So you've got that sort of constant sort of rolling thing that, and obviously if people like one book, you hope that they'll go back and look at what other books you've got. So it
And
sort of follows on.
do you mainly talk about the books and the writing in the social media, or do you sort of give a little bit of your actual personal life and that kind of thing, or do you try
Yeah,
and
I do
those
when it's
two?
sort of appropriate and sort of linked to, I sort of link it to writing. And obviously it's, you know, you always see with social media, it's always the more personal posts that get that engagement. So it is doing a balance of, yeah, you know, you can put up things about when you've got an offer on a book and things like that, but it is those sort of personal
Yes,
posts that
always when you put your mugshot on either the picture or the video, that's what everyone wants to see, even though that's
yeah.
usually the things we least want to do, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of my best received posts and sort of had the most likes and most comments was, I think it was last year I did one. I was looking through reviews at sort of the good and bad ones, and I realized for each book, I sort of picked out one of sort of the best reviews and the worst reviews and how opposite they were. And I did a whole post with I mean, it was sort of 6 or 7 books with these, you know, 5-star review and then a 1 or 2-star review. And I did a picture of me with holding a pot of Marmite. going about how it's, you know, books can be that love or hate thing, that somebody
Yeah,
loves something, the other person will absolutely hate it. And that just, I think it just caught, I think for anybody writing, they sort
that
of
was a
obviously
complete
connected with that.
understandable.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And also I do think it's very important that the cover and the blurb really capture what the book is about, because the last thing you want is someone buying a book thinking they're getting one thing and
Yeah.
then being annoyed that it's another. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And but I think also, I mean, I think I've noticed that a couple of times with people. I've had a couple of reviews where they've sort of saying the covers of mine, it looked like it was going to be more of a light, fluffy story, where actually I quite often have quite, you know, deep themes, or, you know, One Winter's Night, the sort of the themes that run through it are grief and loss, and An Island in the Sun mentions things about, you know, a miscarriage and things like that. So I think people are sometimes quite surprised that, but I think that goes with lots of sort of those kind of romance and women's fiction. And I think
Yeah.
that's where people have got this misleading thing of, oh, a romance is just fluff and love and that's it, when actually it's about human experiences. So yeah, so there's often sort of deeper themes in it, but there is a happy ending. So
And I think for it to be really moving and really connect with the readers, it does need to touch on deeper emotional things as well.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, but I think people are used to that now, with sort of covers obviously looking appealing, particularly on romances. So I think most people get that they are hopefully expecting a story that has more depth than you know, just the romance. So
So you are obviously managing to make full-time writing work. And I
yeah.
guess that's by putting different strands to the bow. So there's Boldwood books,
Yeah.
self-published books, and you also run a festival, don't you?
Yes, yeah, which is voluntary and so
Right.
sort of extra. But yeah, and that's for children. So it's Storytale Festival, which is in Bristol, my hometown. And yeah, it's sort of really to encourage kids and teens to be creative and write and read and sort of be immersed in the wonderful world of children's books. So yeah, so that's sort of a I do on the side as well. So
Right, right.
yeah,
So that is keeping you very busy. But I suppose it keeps you plugged into book world, publishing
yeah,
world. So that's all.
yeah. And I mean, my son's 10. And in fact, I co-founded the festival in 2019. So he's sort of grown up with it as well. And so it's been lovely to see how much it's, you know, his love of books. And in fact, he's dyslexic. So he really struggles to read by himself, although he's massively improved, and sort of I think he's recently sort of clicked at how wonderful it is to sort of pick up a book and read it himself. But I still read to him at night, which is lovely because we just get through reams and reams of like middle grade books, which is lovely because they're, you know, exactly. I mean, I absolutely loved reading those kind of books. I've written a middle grade, you know, time travel adventure myself. And so it's just wonderful and I wouldn't have time to ever read those kind of books without reading to him.
Yes.
So for as long as he's happy for me to read to him, I will carry on doing that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I find with my children, who we both read a lot to, that they still love an audiobook.
okay,
But they
yeah.
still love being read too.
Yeah, I think it's a lovely thing. It's you know, it's really relaxing. You think of somebody else just reading to you, and
Mhm.
particularly for him because he finds it hard reading. He
Yeah.
loves stories and he's writing his own, you know, and his spellings, and you know, he can't spell the words, but his ideas and sort of the language he's using is amazing. So it will all just help and it will all click into place at some point. So for him, because he finds it hard work reading, you know, it's just a lovely thing to have those stories without having to have the stress of, oh, I don't understand that and it's hard work. So
Mhm. And so, what tips would you give people who want to write or who are just starting out on the writer journey?
I think it's just to read, which again, if you've been set up from when you're little reading and having that love of books, you're kind of set up really well anyway. But yeah, I think it is just writing and not worrying about. I think that's the thing of that first draft. It's not worrying too much about, oh, this doesn't sound any good, or it's not going to work out. It's just writing and just getting something down. And I think I've learned that over the years that it is, you don't have to worry about that first draft, and then you can go back and fix
Yes,
it.
and the only way to really improve your writing is to keep writing.
Yeah. Well, I've noted, because I'm Boldwood are republishing one of my self-published books, which isn't one of the romances. It's sort of more of a issue-based women's fiction book, which I was going to change the cover and change the title because it doesn't really fit and it doesn't really sell how it looks. So they're republishing it, but so I'm going back and editing it. And I've actually realized there's more to edit because my writing has improved, and I feel that actually not massively changing the story, but just making things, yeah, it's just that sort of polishing that.
Yeah.
It's amazing in sort of, 8 years since it was published, how much sort of I've changed as a writer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of my books that they're republishing this summer, I wrote around about 2000.
Oh, really? So yeah.
That is a long time ago. And actually, the thing that really struck me the most was how much kind of meandering down pointless plot avenues were going on. And I mean, it was a long book. It was over 100,000 words.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Much got it down to 75,000 by just
So
taking out all this meandering and characters who weren't really going anywhere and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of proves, doesn't it, that just that writing, it's sort of a continual learning process, isn't it? It's yeah,
absolutely. Now, is there anything else that I haven't mentioned that you would like to mention?
I don't know. I'm going to the RNA Awards on Monday for Winter's Night is nominated in
yes.
Which is really exciting. So the one that is set in Iceland. So it's nominated in the sort of the Christmas holiday category.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I think you actually need to hold up a Greek island escape. So we've got that on camera.
With its beautiful cover.
Yeah.
I love this cover. It's just makes you want to be
gorgeous. That is a holiday in a cover, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's really lovely.
Yeah, Kindle top. What's the highest number so far?
The highest it's got to is number 7. So which was bonkers. In fact, it was my birthday. Was it last week? And it got I think it got into it was the day after my birthday. It got into the top 10, but it was just outside. It was I was watching it all day.
Yeah, because it updates like hourly, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's supposed to. I don't think it does, though. I'm trying to really stop myself from checking it too often. I just think you need to leave it a few hours and then check it. So yeah. No, it's done amazingly well. And I think again, it's that combination of things with this one. I think it's the fact that it's set in Greece and that cover just draws you in. So I think it's and the time of year. I think that's also the thing of, the time of year. Everybody's looking forward to sort of summer now, and
yes, it came out in the kind of very tail end of winter when we were desperate for some summer sunshine. And
yeah.
So the next book comes out in August. Called
An Island Promise. I nearly forgot them. It's because we've been deciding on it. It's gone through a couple of but no, it's An Island Promise, which is set on Ibiza.
Oh, fantastic. So did you get a little research trip in?
No, I didn't. It was just absolutely no time to be able to do that. But Caroline, my editor, knows Ibiza really well. So that was incredibly helpful. So, and again, it was just loads of research and I've done that before. I didn't go to Madeira either for An Island in the Sun. So, and hopefully nobody's pulled me up on it. But it is amazing how much you can. I mean, obviously nothing beats actually going to the place. But yeah, it's amazing what you can sort of research and yeah, find out.
Yeah. Oh, I know. One last question. What were the important books for you growing up? Were there like one or two titles that you just thought, oh my God, this is an amazing, amazing book. It's really inspired me to read or to write or...
Yeah, I think it was adventure stories for me. So it was I'm gonna have blanks of names now. But like the Narnia books. I loved Roald Dahl as well. I'm trying to think what other ones, but it was like Swallows and Amazons. Yeah, so all that. And I remember reading The Hobbit as well and just getting completely engrossed in that and just sitting in my bedroom reading it. But also I had, my parents read to me as well. So books were always really important, but yeah, adventure stories, which is kind of, and it's also that I sometimes think, how have I ended up writing romances? Because quite often I wrote short stories for a while and they were quite dark and they were sort of fantasy or sci-fi or so sort of very different from what I write now. And yeah, adventure stories. So, but yeah, I think it's just that, just that love of stories from when I was little.
Interesting. And I think people often read quite different books to the kind of books they write, because it's like almost like you want to take a break from what you...
Yeah, I have found, and I feel really bad at times because I think there's so many other, authors, particularly with bolded authors, and I have read books, but I do find it helpful to read things that are not anything to do with what I'm writing. So yeah, so quite often, or I've read sort of historical ones, and I've read romantasy a lot recently. And again, yeah, and like, again, it's that adventure as well. So, but yeah, so quite often reading vastly different things.
Well, because you don't want to take the fun away from reading, do you? Because if you
No,
read similar things, you'd be probably thinking work thoughts like, oh, this is too alike, or oh, I should think about doing something like this, or...
yeah, no, it's not, and it is nice to read as a reader, isn't it? Rather than, and sort of when I've been asked by publishers to read, advanced review copies, and quite often I will, but then it's sort of mixing that up with, and I also find I don't have that much time to read, so it kind of feels precious to, sometimes it's just the case that particularly when I was really stressed with doing the edits and the deadline, and I just wanted to be switch off when I was reading and just escape into something completely different. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely.
And all the very best with this current book and the next book. Very exciting times.
Yes, that'd be good.